Welcome to the show. I'm David Knight, and I'm the one that's live from Austin, Texas. Alex is going to be live from London later on in the show. He's going to be joining us at the bottom of the hour, and we've got special reports there from other staff on there in London live. Leanne McAdoo's got a report about some breaking corruption scandals in the UK. Now, this is interesting because this is what Nick Clegg, who is the Deputy Prime Minister of the UK, said. He said, "It remains a place where power is hoarded, decisions are opaque, and the people who take those decisions are not properly held to account." Sounds like Bilderberg, doesn't it? Actually, he was talking about Westminster. He was talking about the lobbying scandal that is breaking there. It's really shaking people up. They've got 3 different members of Parliament, actually they were House of Lords, that resigned as part of a journalist sting at the end of the week and over the weekend. And these people who resigned were peers Lord Cunningham, Lord Mackenzie, Ulster Unionist peer Lord Laird. You know, when you start calling people Lord, it's almost like you're just begging to be used. But so many of these politicians act like they're the Lord to start with. But they also had a Tory member of Parliament, Patrick Mercer. Now, the thing these guys all had in common was that journalists who were posing as lobbyists went to them and proposed influence peddling to them and got them on videotape accepting it. And the amazing thing that happened after this was that several of these people who were caught in the scam said, "I'm going to fight these charges because I didn't accept any money." Well, of course they didn't accept any money. It was a sting. It was all made up. They weren't going to pay them money. So that's one of the most amazing excuses for unethical behavior I've ever seen. But Clegg also wrote an op-ed piece on Monday in the Daily Telegraph, and he said, what they're seeing here with this influence peddling is really the political equivalent of Groundhog Day and indicative of a wider problem. Yeah, it really is. You know, when you look at what's going on at Bilderberg, and you look at the fact that they've got at least 5 politicians from the UK, as well as 5 major bankers, and you've got 2 major financial newspapers, The Economist and the Financial Times, are all in attendance there. And when you look at how secretive that is, they're talking about registering lobbyists in the UK and having full disclosure. Well, what about Bilderberg? This is so much larger. There was a story that broke on Sunday. We actually had it on our website, and it didn't ring a bell with me. I realized they were British politicians, but I didn't know exactly who these guys were. And we had it on INFOWARS that said Ed Balls and George Osborne were going to be attending Bilderberg. Well, those guys are the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. Now, the way that works is that the party that's in power has a cabinet, just like here. But unlike here, they have a shadow cabinet from the opposition. So they have a person who is going to essentially shadow his counterpart in the government and critique what he's doing. So George Osborne is the shadow chancellor, and then we've got a shadow government going in Bilderberg, and they're both going to the Bilderberg conference. These are the guys who are like the Treasury, head of the Treasury Department. They're the Exchequer, the people who essentially, I guess you could say, write the checks. Maybe that's where that came from. But they are the financial side of the government there at the UK. And the fact that the very highest levels of the financial cabinet would be there of both parties sheds a lot of light on the same problem that we've got here in America, and that is full spectrum dominance of the political system by the global elites. They own both parties. And it's interesting, they've now taken Nick Clegg, who is kind of a third party that's come into play here, and Nick Clegg has been kind of thrown into this corruption scandal. They're going to hang this all on Nick Clegg, tell him he's got to clean up the swamp. And if he doesn't, they can basically push their ethical problems off on him. We'll be right back with some more reports about that and Alex Jones at the bottom of the hour. Stay tuned.
I'm Darren McBreen, and these are some of the new items that are available now at InfoWarsShop.com.
Alert the public to Obama's blatant abuse of power with the new Obama t-shirt. Obama's Joker face on the front and come and take it on the back. It's time to publicly call him out for what he is, a tyrant. Defend the Second Amendment with our top seller Come and Take It t-shirts. And look at that, women's cut tank tops and t-shirts now available. Nice hat. plus the Don't Tread on Me flag. And now you can become a micro distributor of the INFOWARS magazine. Plus, get your own copy delivered right to your door each and every month. And if you're tired like I am of you and your family being exposed to polluted drinking water, get the Pro One high-performance water filter. It gets rid of all pathogenic bacteria, cyst, fluoride, heavy metals, and numerous other contaminants.
So join the revolution at InfoWarsShop.com.
Welcome back. I'm David Knight. We're going to have Alex Jones with us live from London with some other InfoWar reporters. That'll be at the bottom of the hour. And we were just talking about the breaking lobbyist scandals in the UK and how similar they are to what's going on with Bilderberg, and yet very few people are still talking about Bilderberg. As I said before, Nick Clegg said, and think about this as Bilderberg. I'm going to read this one more time and just put in Bilderberg instead of Westminster, which is what he said. Bilderberg remains a place where power is hoarded, decisions are opaque, and the people who make those decisions are not properly held to account. That's exactly what's going on. You couldn't describe Bilderberg any better than you could the scandals that are going on there with lobbyists, because that's essentially what it is. It's a lobbying scandal. And this is what he also said on the BBC. He says, I regard it a little bit like eradicating malaria in Africa. You use a bit of disinfectant on the mosquito, which is a statutory registry would be, but we have to clean out the stinking swamp, which is particularly the House of Lords, where there is a very nasty whiff of dirty money the whole time. Yeah, that's exactly. We got a very nasty whiff of dirty money the whole time coming from these secretive Bilderberg meetings. And it looks like they're kind of recoiling back from some of the publicity. We've got an article on Infowars.com that's linked on Drudge Report about the Bilderberg Group considering a press conference. It looks like they're really feeling the heat, and it looks like there's some discussion inside the group about going a little bit more open and having a little bit more full disclosure to people. In this article from InfoWars, it says, Paul Joseph Watson writes, if a member or a representative from Bilderberg does not speak publicly about the organization it would be an unprecedented move. However, anyone expecting the group to admit that it is a shadow government manipulating world affairs behind closed doors is probably going to be disappointed. Exactly. Once they come in with this, they are not going to come out and have full disclosure. They're going to spin it. They're going to say, see, there's really nothing to hide. We're not really hiding anything. We're going to be very open and upfront about what's going on here. We also have an article on InfoWars, and all of our Bilderberg coverage is on a special site, Infowars.com/B. That's where we're consolidating all the information about Bilderberg. It's also on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. In this article from Urian Massen, he says, British Bilderberg participant decries the group's secrecy. This is Sherard Cooper-Coles. He's kind of the CEO or director of BAE, which is a very, very large defense contractor, has over 80,000 employees worldwide, selling into the military, part of the military industrial complex. He says that even those inside the perimeter are victims of Bilderberg's steel ring of secrecy. He says, I'm honored to have been asked to go, but it's crazy. The organizers wouldn't tell us where we were going to stay until a couple of weeks beforehand. And he added, some people had to book their private jets in advance. Isn't that a shame? I mean, isn't that a shame that they don't have enough time to book their private jets in advance? They might have to travel with the rest of us rabble and have the guys with blue gloves go all over their bodies. We wouldn't have that happen. We've got some other breaking news here. We've got the Texas legislature is looking at a drone bill. Now, Perry has not decided whether or not he's going to sign it, and quite frankly, when I look at it, I'm kind of undecided about it as well, because it makes a Class C misdemeanor for any private or public entity that uses an unmanned aircraft to capture an image of an individual or privately owned real property in Texas with the intent to conduct surveillance on the individual property captured in the image. So this could be something of a red herring, and because they have numerous exemptions for law enforcement, of course. So it might be something that really just restricts private photography. Not really clear that that's going to be something that we want to see. Also breaking, there's a lot of news like drones that just keep coming back, and So does gun control. And part of the gun control front, of course, is the UN Arms Trade Treaty. And there's an article here from DC Clothesline. It's kind of a blogger here, and he's talking about why hasn't Obama signed the UN Arms Treaty? What is he waiting for? And he says many have suggested the signature will come under cover of darkness sometime in August when Congress is not in town. That's what we're really worried about. You know, they have been very cagey with the timing of the UN Arms Trade Treaty. And understand that the UN Arms Trade Treaty is really about further registration, getting more and more detail and extending it, making it broader, making it deeper, the information that they keep on people. And I believe that this has been the central thrust of this round of gun control all along, that they're eventually going to go, of course, as they've said. We've even had the mayor of Austin, or the second to the mayor, I guess, say that Martinez say that he wanted to go to confiscation eventually. But I think what they're focusing on right now is registration. And as an excuse for that, they're talking about the travel of arms back and forth across borders. You know, like the government did with Fast and Furious. You know, they sent all these arms back and forth and used that as a false flag attack so they could then come in with the Arms Trade Treaty. Unfortunately, it kind of blew up in their face. And it wasn't so much that America cared about all the Mexicans that got killed with the arms that the ATF smuggled over into Mexico to make the Second Amendment look bad, but we had an American law enforcement officer killed. And so that changed everything, got the attention of Congress, and their initial UN Arms Trade Treaty was scheduled to happen last July. And they really couldn't turn that around. Even with the shooting in Colorado exactly a week before the vote was to occur, they didn't get any traction from that. So they delayed it. They said, we'll do it after the election because we don't want American politics to get involved in it. Right. They were going to do something in the lame duck session, except that on the day of the election, as it was apparent that Obama was going to get reelected and they were going to have more Democrat senators, they announced that they were not going to do it in the lame duck session, but they were going to do it in March, which they did. The U.S. and other nations signed on to the UN Arms Trade Treaty. It still has to be signed. It still has to be passed by the Senate. But here's the key. It has to be passed by 2/3 of the Senate, but only if 2/3 of the senators who are present. That's why this is a very dangerous time as they come up to summer recess. They have fewer people in town. We might see them pull something like this. Obama has done this type of thing before, signing the NDAA into effect on New Year's Eve. He likes to do things, pretend that he's not going to do anything, wait for people to stop paying attention, and then do it essentially under cover of darkness or when nobody is looking. So we have to keep a careful eye out on the UN Arms Trade Treaty. That's going to be used as an excuse to track and to register people. And of course, what it really does, now they've played around with the language. Language was stronger at one point, then they weakened the language. But the point is that they are ceding this power to the United Nations. And once they cede that power to the United Nations can then come back with a simple majority vote and change exactly how this thing works. So that's the point. The main point about the UN Arms Trade Treaty is that it is a ceding of power to the UN that they should not be getting, that violates our Constitution. And of course, there'll be constitutional fights over that if it does get signed in. Well, going back to Bilderberg, there's another interesting article from The Guardian, from Charlie Skelton of The Guardian. And he's been one of the people who's been following and reporting on Bilderberg for several years. He started back in 2009. And he has an interesting report from a meeting, and it's actually kind of comical, his account of it. He talks about how it was kind of a mixture, an odd mix of residents from around the local area worried about the possibility of tire damage to their lawn, and the other half were journalists from around the world worried about the geopolitical implications of a conference at which BAE, Stratfor, and General Petraeus will be discussing, quote, Africa's challenges. And that's interesting right there, the fact that this year, for the first time, they've put out a list of the topics that they're going to be covering. Now, of course, we don't know if those are real because it's a very secretive meeting. They're going to great lengths to keep everybody out of there. So they can be talking about whatever they want to, but they've given us a list of topics. When they start talking about Africa's challenges, you kind of have to wonder what kind of challenges they're looking at, especially when you got Petraeus there. You know, when they talk about the surge, they could have been talking about the Iraq troop surge, or they could have been talking about the surge in production of cocaine that came out of Afghanistan while the U.S. Army was occupying it. It had been dropped from the Taliban in control down to about 10% of the world's supply, but under the U.S. control, it shot back up to 90%. That's the real surge that nobody is talking about. And of course, Petraeus has a lot of experience, not only as a commanding general, but also as essentially presiding over the largest production of cocaine in the world. So he's uniquely qualified to be there. And if you saw Luke Rudkowski's video of the award given to Henry Kissinger, the Intrepid Award given to him by General Petraeus, forget this, you won't believe this, defending freedom and democracy. Henry Kissinger, defending freedom and democracy. And Petraeus was just gushing up to him, actually kissing up to him, and actually physically did kiss him on the cheeks. You know, Petraeus really needs to pay more attention to who he's kissing. But now the two of them are at Bilderberg, and they're talking about what's going to happen there. And it's getting out to a lot of other media. We've even got a video here from the International Business Times, where we've got a correspondent who is, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Andrew Kakabadze, perhaps. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but let's play a little bit of that video.
In one sense, all it is a conference of invitation-only people attending. In another sense, it's probably one of the most influential bodies in the world. Established in 1954, European and American interests. The people who are involved in conspiracy theory thinking think it was there to generate wealth. It wasn't. It was there to prevent war. After the Second World War, fundamentally, the elite of
pause it right there. Pause it right there.
US.
Now, it wasn't about naked financial interest. It was there for peace, right? That's why you've got all of these military-industrial complex people there. Have we had peace? We've had 60 years of constant war. But in that 60 years, they have established a European Union and the euro, which is what they were really after. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Our viewers have demanded it, so now you're gonna get it. More pro-Second Amendment gun shows in the month of June.
What we've learned is you cannot hide behind an I-beam when there's a 50 cal present.
Brothers in Arms, 50 cal ammo review, and more. Coming in the month of June to the InfoWar.
Now, there was a meeting yesterday that was covered by Charlie Skelton with The Guardian, and he was talking about the odd mix of people with local concerns and international journalists who are looking at a much larger picture. One of the things that came out of that Alex has talked about as well from his sources was that they've been planning this for 18 months. 18 months. But of course, we hear even from some other Bilderberg attendees that they didn't know until the very last minute. It was called, and get this, Operation Discuss. That's DISCUSS, although we would think it was Operation Disgust, as in disgusting. They've been running that for 18 months, and of course, they have to be very, very secretive about this because of terrorism. Terrorism. Was terrorism an issue for the last 60 years? It's now the excuse for everything the government does. Of course, the government needs to keep all information hidden from us. There can be no transparency in government. We have to come after whistleblowers with an iron fist. Why? Because of terrorism. We have to put our hands down your pants at the airport because why? Terrorism. But what have we achieved from this for the last 60 years? We had, just before the break, we had Andrew Kakabadze talking about the fact that they were secretive because they were doing this for our own good. They were coming together to get world peace. And yet, for the last 60 years, we've had nothing but continuous warfare. Warfare that benefits the military-industrial complex, the bankers, and the politicians who are primarily the attendees at these Bilderberg meetings. doesn't really work out too good for us there. Have you got a little bit more of that, Andrew Kakabatsi? Could you pull that up from where we were listening to it? Because he had a few more things to talk about there that I thought were very interesting. But we're going to have Alex in just a few minutes from London. Meanwhile, in Europe and around the world, people are rejecting Monsanto's GMO products. And there's concern because we just had this Supreme Court decision last week, or perhaps 2 weeks ago, where it was unanimous in the Supreme Court that Monsanto could patent their genes and could enforce this on other farmers, even if it came into their field and cross-contaminated their own seeds that were non-GMO. Monsanto could come after them as if they had planted and infringed on their copyrighted genes. And we've now had a situation where exactly that has happened. And as a result, several Asian countries as well as European countries are banning wheat that's produced in the United States because they're concerned about contamination from GMO products in Monsanto. Isn't it interesting that GMO products as well as fluoride are not allowed in Europe and in many places in South America? And in India, they basically ran Monsanto out because so many farmers there were committing suicide. Monsanto was doing the same thing to them that they are trying to do, which they were successful in doing in this Supreme Court decision that happened. And that is coming in and doing a test and saying there's some strains of our product in your crop, and then charging the farmers in India. Of course, these are poor farmers, and they were running them out of business by the thousands, and they were committing suicide. A very large number of them committed suicide. So to protect the food supply, even to protect predatory business practices of Monsanto, it's been banned in many areas of the world. And yet, in America, they get a Supreme Court decision that is totally unanimous. You can see the same thing happening with fluoride. All of these European health ministers have said, we are not going to allow fluoride in the water. And yet, in America, we get it in massive doses. You have to ask yourself, what is the matter with America? It seems like we're kind of the target for the globalist elite to dumb us down and to take our money and to transfer our wealth to China. And that's what we've seen for the last 60 years. You have that clip from Andrew Kakabatsi up? Can we pull that up a little bit, or we're still working on that, still trying to find it? Okay, let's play it from where we were, or you can back it up just a little bit.
Invitation-only people attending. In another sense, it's probably one of the most influential bodies in the world. Established in 1954, European and American interests. The people who are involved in conspiracy theory thinking think it was there to generate wealth. It wasn't. It was there to prevent war. After the Second World War, fundamentally, the elite of Europe and the US wanted to ensure that the world would never have anything like it again. So it started in many ways for good reasons. In all that, there was also a protection of existing
They were
wealth.
very well intentioned.
But
They did it for our good.
Just conspiratorial. It was
now you see
actually
what's happening here. Pause it there, and we'll pick that up after the break if we've got time. But what's happening here, they can no longer keep it secret. So now what you're going to see is they're going to try to spin this in a positive way. They were just meeting in secret for our own good.
We're on the march. I had tried everything. I'd cut back the amount of food I was eating. I was lifting weights and jogging, but nothing was working. My body was literally starving for minerals and trace elements as well as key vitamins. And as soon as I had that, I immediately could eat half of what I was eating previously and be satisfied. Now, there are hundreds of great products at InfoWarsTeam.com, but I want to point out the 3 that have helped me lose 37 pounds in just 2 months. Products like Beyond Tangy Tangerine, Pollen Burst, and Rebound. When I started taking the Tangy Tangerine and other products every day, I lost more than 37 pounds in just 2 months. Now that's results. I want to challenge my listeners to go to InfoWarsTeam.com and to order just 3 of their products, and you will see the changes in the way you look, feel, and in your appetite almost immediately. Start your journey to health and wellness today. InfoWarsTeam.com.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, live here in Austin, and coming up live from London is Alex Jones. He'll be joining us in just a few minutes. Well, we've got a video here that we were listening to just before the break from Andrew Kakabadze, and he's part of the friendly face now that is coming out for Bilderberg. They're going to be a little bit more open, and they're trying to explain how this group that was vehemently denied by the mainstream even existed until just a few years ago. For decades have been meeting in secrecy. After Jim Tucker started covering them, they vehemently denied that they existed. They poked fun at anybody who said they existed, called them a conspiracy theorist. But of course now they were just operating for our own good. And here's what Andrew Kakabadze says about that. Let's continue on with what he was saying.
In one sense, all it is a conference of invitation-only people attending. In another sense, it's probably one of the most influential bodies in the world. Established in 1954, European and American interests. The people who are involved in conspiracy theory thinking think it was there to generate wealth. It wasn't. It was there to prevent war. After the Second World War, fundamentally, the elite of Europe and the US wanted to ensure that the world would never have anything like it again. So it started in many ways for good reasons. In all that, there was also a protection of existing wealth. But it was not just conspiratorial, it was actually for social benefit, originally.
Pause it right there. Pause it right there. Yeah, there was also some financial benefit. You know, like Prince Bernhard, one of the founders of that, a former Nazi, also was involved in huge scandals of influence peddling in the defense ministries. Yeah, there was some, those kind of things just kind of go back and forth. You know, they're keeping us free while we paid large amounts of money to the military-industrial complex. Just think back to when we were hurling cruise missiles at several $1 million apiece at Gaddafi in the desert and blowing up his tents. That really wasn't working out to anybody's benefit except for the military-industrial complex that was going to rebuild and resupply cruise missiles to the United States government. I mean, how many times can you spend millions, perhaps, I don't know how many millions of dollars the cruise missiles were at the time, how many times can you do that just blowing up tents in a desert? I mean, talk about asymmetrical warfare. That's amazing. Play a little bit more of this clip.
Well, you've got about 120 people whom any terrorist would like to attack. So the secrecy here is largely because in the security, because you have some of the best brains in the world meeting. You have politicians,
right there.
Finance directors.
Okay, so they've got to keep it secret because they've got all these people meeting there. Well, they have G8 conferences, they have G20 conferences where they have the heads of state of 8 countries or 20 countries that are meeting, and they're not secretive about it like this. This is nothing but rampant influence peddling and lobbying going on here, and we can also see, though, that they have a globalist eugenicist agenda from their meetings that have been leaked from 1955. We see that they were planning the EU and the European Union. They want a massive consolidation of a world government, and that's what these people are about here. Now, one of the things he was talking about, clearly he doesn't believe that Aaron Swartz was this dejected, depressed person, and neither do the people who know him. His fiancée said that he had just was very upbeat and had proposed to her for the just recently, just before he supposedly took his life. And they'd been seeing each other for quite some time, and he had not proposed to her in quite some, you know, for this long relationship. So he was clearly looking to a future there, and he was not the kind of person who was going to be bullied and intimidated. He was a fighter. You know, he wasn't as forceful as Alex, but he had a backbone of spine, a backbone, and a spine that he was fighting this. He was someone who took on the government and relished his victories in defeating cybersecurity. Now, at the same time this happened, there was a lot of criticism when people that believed the official government line that he had been bullied by the government into committing suicide. In defense of the prosecutor, Carmen Ortiz, her husband posted on Twitter saying that Schwartz had rejected a plea bargain offer that would have reduced his sentence to only a few months. It was a little over 3 months. He posted that he had rejected that. That sounded like the Aaron Swartz that we know. That sounded like the fighter. That sounded like the person, excuse me, who wanted to fight this in court and win. And yet, that was taken down shortly after that. Excuse me. This prosecutor, Carmen Ortiz, had just had, at the same time that Schwartz had committed suicide, just a week prior to that, she had come under withering public criticism for going after a small owner of a hotel. There had been 15 years. They'd had 14 drug busts over 15 years there, and she went after his hotel and tried to confiscate it from him. And she was slapped down hard by an appeals court. And this is something they do in the war on drugs frequently. They go in and they charge the inanimate object, the hotel or the airplane or the automobile, with being an accessory to crime. And because there had been 14 drug busts over a 15-year period, and this is a pretty bad area, and according to all reports, this hotel owner had done everything he could to try to keep the place clean and secure and free of gangs. But she used that as a pretense to go in and try to steal his hotel. And she was shot down by that, got a lot of criticism from that. She was somebody who was on a fast track politically. She had been touted by the governor of Massachusetts as a possible successor. And then within a very short time, this case about the drug war hit and had a lot of backlash publicly. And then there was backlash from the Aaron Schwartz suicide. And so in her defense, her husband posted that he had turned down a plea bargain. But then he mysteriously hangs himself. And we're told that it was out of depression. And like Alex said, we've also seen the FBI go down and get this accessory to this person who he wasn't an accessory. He was somebody who knew Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, and they questioned him several times, and they had an FBI agent from Massachusetts come down, and the next thing you know, this guy has been shot in the head, but also shot 6 times in the body. Multiple FBI agents saying that they're doing this out of self-defense. Pretty amazing. But they're not the only ones. We've got Bradley Manning, who's we just had some pictures surface of Bradley Manning looking like a ghost. We're told that from July 2010 to April 2011, he was held in a maximum custody detainee at the Quantico Marine Base in Virginia, where he sat in a fluorescent lit 6-by-8-foot cell with no window, no natural light for 23 hours a day. Guards checked him every 5 minutes. He was stripped naked at night because authorities deemed the elastic in his underwear could be used to harm himself. Just amazing. Just amazing. When you go back and you look at the history of Kissinger and look at the special report that was on the nightly news on Monday night, look at his involvement in things like Operation Condor in South America. Very few people in America really know what was going on, but it was something that involved not just Chile and Pinochet, but also it involved Argentina, the Dirty War, and it involved many other countries in South America as well. It went up to Brazil, but it was focused primarily in Chile and Argentina. Now, at the time, Kissinger was disavowing any knowledge that he had anything to do with any of this. But in the late 1990s and the early 2000s, we had declassified documents that were released that showed that he knew very much about this. He was very much involved with all this. What has changed, however, is since the 1970s, when Kissinger was doing these sorts of things in secret and denying that he was doing it, now the Obama administration tortures people openly. They used to use surrogates to do this sort of thing in South America and other places. Now they do it openly, unashamedly. They assassinate, they torture, they use drone kill lists, and they don't apologize for it. Folks, this is going to come back to the U.S. This is not something that is going to stay abroad. We already see DHS arming itself. We know that when the American people tolerate this sort of thing against human beings in other countries, it is going to come back, and it's going to come, these chickens are going to come home to roost in our country as well. On another note, Obamacare, the thing that will not go away as much as we want it to. Remember when they were trying to sell this and they told us that in the UK, it was working just great, and Canada, everything's working just fine. We need to do exactly what they're doing. Well, the Mail Online reports that hospitals are now going to have to close to save the national health system there from financial ruin. They say that they're predicted to hit a deficit of £54 billion by the year 2022. They say the service is no longer sustainable in its current form. They're calling for transfer of services from hospitals to communities. But of course, this was what we needed to have in our country, we were told. We're already seeing insurance rates go up 146%, and it hasn't even been fully implemented, and it's going to get worse because they're going to say that private system has totally failed and we need to take it over. That's what they're trying to do, is take over a major segment of the economy. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Many anthropologists and archaeologists believe that before man even discovered the power to harness and use fire, we were involved in agrarian activities. That is, taking the seeds of plants and then replanting them to produce more. The very foundation of our modern civilization and human culture is centered around the planting and cultivation of edible plants, fruits, vegetables, nuts, you name it. And the globalists have been going after gardening. They've been harassing people that have gardens in their front yards or their backyards. They've called for licenses for people to have gardens because you can't trust prisoners in the police state America to be able to grow their own food. That's why I've come to the realization that we need to become self-sufficient. You need to be informed. You need to have the Second Amendment to protect yourself. You need to be politically active to wake up others. You need to filter your water. But you also need to plant a garden. Even if you live in an apartment, you can do this. If you live in the countryside, obviously you can do it on a grand scale. There are so many green belts and areas that humans don't even visit, nearby cities and in suburbs, where people are now more and more planting their own little private gardens and meadows and off the side of the road. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a revolutionary act to unplug from the television, to unplug from the computer and all the globalist propaganda, and to go out in your backyard or your front yard or planters at your apartment or on the roof of the building where you live, and to plant a garden.
Here are some of the amazing deals at INFOWARS Seed Center at INFOWARSShop.com. The Survival Seed Vault by My Patriot Supply features only the finest survival heirloom seeds for a robust and hardy garden, even in the toughest of times. The ARC All-in-One Seed Kit contains 70 varieties of 50,000 seeds of fruits, vegetables, medicinal, and culinary herbs. All ARC seeds are heirloom. Each type is labeled and sealed separately for ease of use and longevity. The Deluxe Emergency Seed Bank combines 3 of Emergency Seed Bank's top sellers: the Family Survival Emergency Seed Bank, the Medicinal Herb Seeds Pack, and the Culinary Herb Seeds Pack. We also have starter varieties of the deluxe seed packages for fruit, salad, salsa, peppers, and medicinal herbs and more. Go to the INFOWARS Seed Center at INFOWARSShop.com.
A little seed can grow a huge tree that produces fruit for up to 50 years. We have the best life bombs. That's what these are. We have the best weapons against death out there at the lowest prices, waiting for you to lovingly plant them and lovingly grow them and lovingly eat them and share them with others. We will strike back against the New World Order, and this is only one more initiative in our fight against them. So please join us at InfoWarsShop.com, or you can link through at Infowars.com at the InfoWars Seed Center.
Now, in other news, we've got an interesting thing. You know, part of the agenda of Bilderberg is eugenics. And we've seen that it's not just Bilderberg. They're not the only organization. When Andrew Kakabadze was talking about it, he said, well, you know, there's a lot of different organizations. We've got the Trilateral Commission. We've got the Council on Foreign Relations. Yeah, and they have a tremendous amount of influence. But then we also have other meetings, just like the one that took place just a couple of weeks ago in Kiowa, South Carolina. Bill Gates held a conference there, which is kind of focused on quote-unquote health issues. And we know that Bill Gates, coming as he does from a couple of parents who are very connected in Planned Parenthood, he has been coming up with one thing after the other that make us suspicious. Things like vaccinating people by releasing mosquitoes. He's absolutely obsessed with vaccinating everybody on the planet. And places where he's gone in and vaccinated large portions of the population that hadn't been vaccinated before, we see the kind of consequences that you expect from vaccination. But certainly there are other organizations besides Bilderberg. As we shine the light on Bilderberg and they're starting to talk about maybe they're going to have press conferences, maybe they're going to talk to people, maybe they're going to release their agenda, they're concerned about being portrayed as a shadowy group. So they may go a little bit more public. They may disband it completely. They may meet in other areas, as we saw with Bill Gates buying out, as they did at Bilderberg, buying out an entire luxury hotel for the elites to stay there and making sure that nobody else came in, using the security that taxpayers pay for as well as their own private security. But as part of this eugenics agenda here, large part of that is hard population control. Of course, China's got its one-child policy, and we've seen the disastrous consequences of that there. Now Myanmar is doing the same thing in their country. They're putting on a two-child policy, which, as Urian Masin has talked about, Europe has talked about doing the same thing. And it's pretty amazing. They treat children who are born there as if they did not exist. We're going to have more information about that, and we'll be talking to Alex right after the top of the hour. Stay tuned.
Hello, this is Hank Hill, and I'm telling you what, you need to listen to Alex Jones.
Yeah. INFOWARS.com.
Judge, what is the secret of the universe?
INFOWARS.com.
Just before the break, I was talking about Myanmar imposing a population control. Now, they are singling out, this is a little bit different from the China one-child policy. In Myanmar, they are imposing this strictly on a Muslim minority. But it's not just that. Listen to what the policy is. It says these children of this Muslim minority that are born out of wedlock or in a family that already has two children will not receive any status whatsoever from the government. Now, what does that mean? That means they won't get any education. That could be a blessing in disguise. But they won't get any other government services. They're unable to receive travel permission, so they won't be able to get out. And they are later not permitted to marry or to acquire property. They are subject to arbitrary arrest and detention. This is the sort of thing that we all are concerned about seeing when, earlier this week, we had Motorola's mobile division talking about what a terrible imposition it is to have to remember all of your passwords. So we're just going to make that easy for you. If you want to deal with the internet, you're going to have to wear this patch, or you're going to have to swallow this pill. And if you don't opt into things like this, this is the sort of thing, exactly what they're doing in this Muslim minority here, the fact that they cannot travel, they cannot marry, they are subject to arbitrary arrest and detention at any time. Why? Because they were the third child, because they offended this authoritarian government, and Myanmar is a very, very authoritarian government. But this is exactly the sort of thing that we're concerned about happening in this country as our government makes it more and more difficult to do anything without being registered or identified by them. Remember that a huge part of the immigration bill that is up for consideration is biometric identification. Now, of course, they take our fingerprints, they have pictures of us, they have facial recognition. They are taking this to an all-new level. And what is different about this is that in the name of saving us from illegal immigrants, they're going to make this biometric identification a prerequisite to getting a job. You see where this is leading? You got to have their ID before you can get a job. You have to have their approval before you'll be able to get onto the internet. Does this sound like the book of Revelations or what? We're getting very close to something like that, aren't we? Do we have Alex on the line there, guys? Ready to come in, or? Okay, we're going to have him in just a second. They're still having a little bit of issues with him. Now, one of the other things that's just come up is the top national security post. We've just had a resignation there. And it looks like Tom Donilon, who was the national security advisor, is resigning, and he's going to be replaced by, guess who? Susan Rice. Yeah, this is the person who was essentially touting the story that the Benghazi attack was a reaction to that, I wouldn't even call it a C-rate movie. I don't know. It's the most ridiculous, poorly produced movie I've ever seen. I can't believe that it would cause anybody to riot in the streets if you look at that, unless they want their money back from their ticket. It was just amazingly bad film. And Susan Rice and Hillary Clinton were making the talk show rounds telling everybody that was what was behind the Benghazi attacks. Now, we know from other sources have told us that essentially there was internecine fighting going on within the CIA, that this was an area that was arming certain elements of our terrorist co-sponsors that are there. The same people that we're supposedly being protected from were also being armed by the United States government. And we've been told that's what was really behind that, and certainly not a film. But this lady who touted that story is now up for National Security Advisor.
Visit INFOWARS.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.